You won't notice when Babylon begins to rise again. There's no explosion, no sudden collapse, no moment where everything clearly breaks apart. It begins quietly, inside systems, inside institutions, inside the way people start to organize power, belief, and control. And if you want to keep seeing beneath the surface like this, understanding patterns most people miss, make sure you subscribe and follow the channel now, because what we're uncovering is not just history, it's something still unfolding around you. Babylon is not just an ancient city buried under sand, it is a pattern, a recurring mechanism. Every time political power, economic systems, and religious influence begin to merge into a single center, Babylon reappears. It doesn't need the same name, it doesn't need the same walls. What makes it dangerous is not immediate violence, but the illusion of stability it offers, the feeling that everything is finally under control, that humanity no longer needs anything beyond itself. And at that precise moment, the oldest conflict in history begins again. Who occupies the center, God or man? To understand this, we have to go back to the beginning. A name appears early, briefly, but with enormous weight. Nimrod. He is not introduced simply as a strong man or a skilled hunter. He is the first figure in Scripture to transform human fear into organized power. In a world still recovering from the flood, where people lived scattered, vulnerable, and uncertain, Nimrod did something unprecedented. He gathered them. At first, gathering made sense. Being together meant safety. It meant shared labor, shared defense, shared survival. But Nimrod saw something deeper. He didn't just want a community, he wanted a center. And once people begin to revolve around a center, power begins to form. What starts as cooperation becomes structure, and structure, if left unchecked, becomes a system. Nimrod established the first principle of Babylon: transform fear into unity and unity into power. When people share the same fear, they are ready to accept the same solution. And once they accept that solution, they begin to depend on the one who provides it. From that point, a project emerges, a symbol of everything they believe they can achieve, the Tower of Babel. This is not merely architecture, it is a declaration. At that time, the whole earth shared one language. There was no misunderstanding, no communication barrier. Coordination reached a level of near perfection. They didn't rely on natural stone, they manufactured bricks, fired them, standardized them, and technology replaced what the earth naturally provided. And that shift changed something fundamental in the human mind. They no longer saw themselves as dependent beings, but as creators of their own reality. Then the goal was spoken openly. Let us build for ourselves a city and a tower, and make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered. This is the turning point. They were not building to honor God, they were building to secure themselves against their own fragility. They wanted a center strong enough to eliminate vulnerability, but deeper than that, they wanted identity, one they could define without reference to their creator. The Tower of Babel, therefore, is not just a structure, it is an organized rebellion. No weapons, no battlefield, but a collective refusal of divine order. They never say, "We are at war with God," yet everything they do declares it. What makes it even more dangerous is that it looks like a solution. One language, one purpose, one direction. No chaos, no division, everything efficient, everything aligned. But that efficiency hides a fatal flaw. It is built on pride. And then comes the response. God does not destroy the tower with fire. He does not collapse it in a dramatic display. Instead, he touches the system at its strongest point: language. The moment people can no longer understand one another, coordination breaks, and the project halts, not because they lack resources, but because they lose agreement. This is crucial. God does not destroy humanity. He restrains the system. He prevents a dangerous unity, a unity in rebellion. Because when humanity becomes fully united in placing itself at the center, there are no limits to how far it will go. The scattering, then, is not meaningless punishment, it is protection. It restores a condition humanity resisted, diversity, limitation, dependence. But within that limitation, there remains the possibility of returning to God. What once stood as a city now re-emerges as something broader, something harder to locate and therefore harder to resist. In the final vision of Scripture, Babylon is no longer confined to a map. It is revealed as a global system, a structure that reaches across nations, cultures, and economies. The language shifts, the imagery intensifies, and the scale becomes unmistakable. This is Babylon not as a place, but as a network. In the book of Revelation, Babylon appears again, but not as ruins, not as memory. It appears as a living force, active at the end of history. And the first thing that becomes clear is this: it is not describing a single city, it is describing a system that connects the world. This final Babylon operates through three interlocking dimensions: economic, political, and religious. And together, they form a structure that does not merely rule territory, but shapes reality itself. Economically, it becomes a center of trade so vast that everything flows through it. Goods, resources, luxuries, nothing is outside its reach. But the text goes further, unsettlingly further. It describes a marketplace where not only objects are bought and sold, but human lives themselves. Bodies and souls of men become part of the inventory. This is the ultimate extension of the Babylonian pattern. And when profit becomes the highest value, people themselves become commodities. This is not forced at first. It is normalized. It is justified. It is woven into the logic of the system until exploitation no longer appears as cruelty, but as efficiency. Politically, Babylon unites rulers. Kings align with it, not because they are conquered, but because they are persuaded. Power converges voluntarily. Authority is shared, coordinated, centralized. This is not chaos, it is agreement. A global consensus forms, not through war, but through mutual interest. Leaders recognize that participation in the system grants them stability, influence, and access, and so they give their authority to it. And religiously, Babylon completes the structure. It does not necessarily eliminate belief, it redirects it. Truth is no longer defined by what is eternal, but by what is useful. Worship is reshaped into something convenient, something adaptable. Idolatry is no longer primitive, it becomes sophisticated. It blends with culture, with ideology, with identity. And in that blending, it replaces truth. This is the most dangerous transformation. Because once truth is replaced, everything else can be justified. What was once called wrong becomes necessary. What was once called holy becomes optional. And what was once called rebellion becomes progress. But the most subtle aspect of this system is not its scale, it is its method. Babylon does not primarily control through force. It seduces, it offers instead of commands, it rewards instead of punishes. It creates an environment where participation feels beneficial, even desirable. People are not dragged into it, they are drawn into it, through comfort, through opportunity, through the promise of security. And once inside, dependency begins to form. The system provides what people think they need: stability, identity, provision. And over time, stepping outside of it becomes increasingly difficult, not because of chains, but because of reliance. And to leave the system is to lose access, to lose status, to lose connection. This is control without visible oppression, and that is why it is so effective. By the time resistance becomes necessary, most are already entangled. Yet, just as in every previous expression of Babylon, there comes a point where the system reaches its peak. It appears unshakable. Its influence spans the globe. Its structures seem permanent. Its reach seems total. And then, the pattern repeats. The fall comes, but not gradually, not through slow decline or visible erosion. It comes suddenly, in 1 hour. This phrase is not merely about time, it is about shock. It is about the complete reversal of what seemed stable. The system that took generations to build collapses in a moment. Its economic power disappears. Its political alliances fracture. its cultural influence dissolves, and those who depended on it stand at a distance, watching. The kings who aligned with it do not step in to save it, they withdraw. The merchants who prospered through it do not rebuild it, they mourn its loss. But their mourning is not for justice, it is for profit. They grieve not because the system was corrupt, but because it no longer serves them. This reveals something crucial. Babylon does not create loyalty, it creates dependence. And when it falls, that dependence turns into fear. The shift is immediate and absolute. The king loses his mind. The one who ruled over nations can no longer rule over himself. He is driven away from society, reduced to living like an animal, eating grass, exposed to the elements. The image is stark, almost unbearable, but it is precise. Because the fall of pride is never elegant. What makes this moment even more striking is what does not happen. The empire does not collapse. The walls remain. The armies remain. The system continues to function. Babylon does not fall in that hour, but its center is exposed as fragile. This reveals something critical. Babylon does not depend on one man, but it expresses itself through him. And when that man places himself at the center, he becomes the point where judgment must begin. The purpose of this judgment is not random. It is not simply punishment. It is revelation. The king is brought low for a reason, so that he might understand who truly rules. For a time, he lives in that condition, disconnected from reason, stripped of dignity, reduced to something less than what he once was. And in that state, the illusion is broken. The idea that he was self-made, self-sustaining, self-glorifying, it collapses. Then, something changes. The text does not describe a ritual, a ceremony, or a negotiation. It describes a moment. The king lifts his eyes to heaven, and that movement, simple, almost silent, marks the turning point. Because for the first time, his gaze is no longer fixed on what he has built, but on something beyond himself. And with that, his understanding returns. What follows is not a return to pride, but a transformation of perspective. The same mouth that once claimed ownership over Babylon now acknowledges a higher authority. He declares that the dominion of God is everlasting, that all power ultimately belongs not to man, but to the one above. And then something unexpected happens. He is restored, not partially, not symbolically, fully. His reason returns, his position is restored, his kingdom is given back to him, and the same man who was brought down is raised again, but not to the same place internally, because now he knows this is the message that breaks the pattern, even if only for a moment. God does not humble in order to destroy, he humbles in order to restore. The fall was necessary, not to erase the king, but to reorient him, to remove the false center and replace it with the true one. Yet even here, the tension remains. Because while the king changes, Babylon itself does not. The system continues, the structures remain, the culture persists. One man's transformation does not dismantle the pattern, it only reveals that escape from it is possible. And that leaves us with a deeper question. If Babylon can exist as a system beyond any one ruler, then where does it truly live? The question lingers after the restoration of the king. If Babylon can survive the humbling of its ruler, then the true danger is not a single man, it is the system itself. And systems do not forget. They wait for the next voice, the next leader, the next generation willing to step back into the same illusion. That generation arrives sooner than expected. The throne does not remain empty. It is inherited, along with the wealth, the walls, the rituals, and the warning. The name now changes, but the pattern remains. At the center stands Belshazzar. And what makes this moment more dangerous than before is not ignorance. It is knowledge without transformation. This king does not rule in darkness. He inherits a palace that carries the memory of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. The story of pride and judgment is not hidden. It is known. It is part of the history of the empire itself. And yet, that is precisely the problem. Because knowing truth does not guarantee submission to it. Memory, when it is not taken seriously, becomes decoration. And Babylon is skilled at turning warnings into ornaments, something to be observed, not obeyed. The scene begins not with war, but with a feast. 1,000 nobles gathered, wine flowing, the palace alive with sound, with confidence, with the illusion that nothing can shake what has been built. This is how Babylon prefers to present itself, not as fragile, but as unshakable. Stability becomes its message. Celebration becomes its mask. Then, in the middle of that atmosphere, the king makes a decision that crosses a line no empire should cross. He calls for the sacred vessels, the gold and silver taken from the temple in Jerusalem. These were not ordinary objects. They had been set apart, dedicated to the service of God. They carried meaning, weight, and history. And now, they are brought into a hall of intoxication. The tower remains unfinished, but the idea does not die. Babel becomes Babylon, not just a place, but a memory, a blueprint. And that blueprint does not stay in the past. It waits, it adapts, it reappears in different forms, in different ages, often more sophisticated, more efficient, and far harder to recognize. So the real question is not whether Babylon existed. The real question is this. When you look at the world today, at how power is structured, how systems promise security, how people are encouraged to trust in what humanity can build, can you recognize the same pattern rising again? The tower was left unfinished, but the pattern did not disappear. It moved forward in time, waiting for a moment when it could return with greater structure, greater force, and far greater influence. What began as bricks on a plain would eventually become something far more formidable, an empire. And at the center of that empire stood a king whose name would define Babylon at its height, Nebuchadnezzar. By the time Babylon rises again in history, it is no longer an experiment. It is no longer a construction site driven by a single idea. It has become a fully developed system, military, cultural, and religious, all woven together into a single force. This is the evolution of Babel. What was once a tower attempting to reach heaven is now a kingdom that believes it has already secured its place above the nations. Babylon, as an empire, does not rely on a single symbol. It operates through layers. Its armies extend its reach. Its walls display its strength. Its culture seduces those it conquers. And its religion reinforces its authority. It does not simply defeat enemies, it absorbs them. It does not only impose power, it reshapes identity. This is where the mechanism of Babylon becomes clearer. Conquest is only the beginning. Control is the true objective. When Babylon takes a people, it does not merely occupy their land, it begins to rewrite who they are. A language is taught, names are changed, traditions are replaced. The goal is not just obedience, but transformation. We see this with unsettling clarity in the lives of the captives brought from Jerusalem. Among them are young men, intelligent, capable, and chosen not for destruction, but for integration into the system. They are trained in Babylonian knowledge, exposed to its worldview, and most significantly, given new names. Identity itself becomes a tool of control. To change a name is to redefine a person's place in the world. It is to cut the thread that connects them to their past and tie them to a new center. Babylon understands something profound. If you control identity, you control loyalty. And if you control loyalty, you no longer need force. At the same time, Babylon knows how to use what it captures. It does not waste talent, it redirects it. The same minds that once served another kingdom are now employed to strengthen the empire. This is not destruction, it is absorption, and it is far more effective. At the center of all this stands the king. Nebuchadnezzar is not merely a ruler, he is the embodiment of the system. His authority is visible in the walls, in the armies, in the wealth of the city. But more than that, his authority begins to take root in his own perception of himself. There comes a moment when the system no longer needs to convince the king of his greatness. The evidence surrounds him. Every structure, every victory, every voice of praise feeds a single conclusion. He is the center. And when that conclusion settles into the heart, it transforms power into pride. The turning point is not hidden, it is spoken aloud. Standing over the city, looking at everything that has been built, the king declares, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" This is the same voice that echoed in Babel, the same desire to make a name. But now it is no longer collective. It is concentrated in one man. And the system has found its perfect expression, a human being who sees himself as the source, the sustainer, and the purpose of everything around him. This is the essence of Babylon's sin. It is not merely pride, it is replacement. It is placing oneself in the position that belongs to God alone. And just as in Babel, the response does not come through human resistance. There is no rebellion, no invasion, no external force rising against the throne. The judgment comes from above, and it targets the very place the king believed was untouchable, his identity. The king drinks from them, his nobles drink from them, his wives and concubines drink from them, and as they do, they praise gods made of gold, silver, bronze, wood, and stone. This is no longer just pride, this is open defiance. It is the deliberate act of taking what is sacred and reducing it to entertainment. It is the transformation of worship into mockery. Babylon, at this point, is not merely replacing God. It is attempting to humiliate what it cannot control. And then, without warning, the atmosphere breaks. Not with thunder, not with an army, but with something far more unsettling. A hand appears, not a full figure, not a voice speaking aloud, just fingers writing on the wall, illuminated by the light of the palace. The moment is immediate, undeniable, and terrifying. The king sees it, and everything within him collapses. His confidence vanishes. His body betrays him. The one who presides over the feast cannot even steady himself, because for the first time, Babylon encounters something it cannot interpret, cannot control, and cannot silence. The system responds the only way it knows how. The wise men are summoned, the experts, the interpreters. The structure that has always explained the unknown is activated again. But this time, it fails. No one can read the writing. This is the exposure of Babylon's limitation. It can organize armies, build cities, shape culture, but it cannot decode the message of heaven. And when the system cannot explain what is happening, fear spreads quickly. Finally, the name of Daniel is brought forward, a man who does not belong to Babylon, yet stands within it. He is called not because the system values him, but because it has no other option. When he arrives, he refuses the rewards offered to him. This is important. Babylon always tries to buy interpretation, to purchase truth. But truth cannot be negotiated. Before reading the writing, he does something unexpected. He reminds the king of the past, and he speaks of Nebuchadnezzar, his greatness, his pride, his fall, and his restoration. The lesson had already been given. The warning had already been lived. And then comes the accusation, direct and unavoidable. You knew all of this, and you did not humble your heart. This is the difference between ignorance and rebellion. The previous king had to be broken to learn. This one refuses to learn even after seeing the outcome. Then the words are read. Mene, numbered. Your kingdom has been measured, and its end has been determined. Tekel, weighed. You have been evaluated, and you have been found lacking. Perez, divided. Your kingdom will be broken and given to others. Short words. Simple structure. But they carry finality. There is no negotiation in them, no delay, no second chance. What follows is almost surreal. The king, even after hearing the interpretation, continues the ceremony. He rewards Daniel, clothes him in honor, as if protocol can still preserve authority, as if maintaining the appearance of control can delay what has already been decided. But Babylon's fall does not wait for ceremony. That very night, the king is killed. No long siege, no drawn-out collapse, no gradual decline. The empire that appeared untouchable at the feast falls within hours. Another ruler takes the kingdom. The transition is immediate. And this is the critical insight. Babylon does not fall from external pressure alone. It collapses from within. The same system that builds power also creates the conditions for its own destruction. Pride blinds it. Excess weakens it. Contempt for truth isolates it. And when the moment comes, it does not need a massive force to bring it down. It only needs the weight of its own corruption. The feast becomes a turning point. What began as a display of strength ends as proof of fragility. What appeared stable is revealed as already judged. And the phrase that remains, the writing on the wall, becomes more than an expression. It becomes a warning, not just for kings, but for any system that believes it can stand indefinitely while placing itself at the center. Because Babylon never truly falls once, it falls every time it repeats itself. And the only question is whether anyone will recognize the warning before the writing appears again. The fall of that night should have ended the story. A king judged, a kingdom transferred, a system exposed. But Babylon does not end with the collapse of a single throne. It changes form. It moves beyond geography. It sheds its walls and begins to operate in ways that are less visible, but far more expansive. The fall is total. There is no recovery, no rebuilding, no second phase. The system is not reformed, it is removed. What once dominated the world becomes a memory, a warning, a demonstration. And the speed of that fall is part of the judgment, because it exposes the illusion. What appeared permanent was never secure. What seemed powerful was already measured. What looked stable was already divided. This is the final expression of the same principle seen from the beginning. Babel tried to reach heaven through unity and technology. Ancient Babylon ruled through power and pride. Final Babylon controls through desire and dependence. But all of them share the same foundation, a human-centered system attempting to occupy the place of God. And all of them share the same end. They fall, not because they lack strength, but because they were built on the wrong center. Which brings the story back, once again, to the question that has been present from the very beginning. If Babylon can take the form of a city, an empire, or an entire global system, then where is it being built right now? If Babylon can appear as a city, an empire, or a global system, then the only way to truly understand it is to step back and observe its pattern across time. And because what looks different on the surface often shares the same structure underneath. At Babel, the tool was technology, fired bricks, organized labor, a single language. These were not neutral elements. They were instruments used to achieve a specific goal, to resist dispersion. Humanity did not want to spread as commanded. It wanted to remain concentrated, secure, and self-sustaining. Technology became the means to build that illusion. The tower was not just a structure, it was a strategy to eliminate dependence. Centuries later, in ancient Babylon, the tool changes. It is no longer primarily technology, it is military power. Armies extend influence, walls enforce boundaries. Conquest replaces construction, but the objective remains consistent: domination. What Babel attempted symbolically, Babylon enforces physically. It gathers people not through shared language alone, but through force, policy, and control. The system matures. It learns how to expand beyond a single location and impose itself upon others. Then, in its final form, Babylon evolves again. The primary instrument is no longer bricks or armies, it is economy. Trade, wealth, and global exchange become the channels of influence. Instead of forcing submission, it creates dependency. Instead of conquering territory, it integrates markets. The reach becomes invisible but absolute, and the goal reaches its most refined expression: global control. Across these stages, Babel, ancient Babylon, and final Babylon, the tools shift, but the intention does not. Each phase adapts to its context, using what is most effective in that era. Yet the center remains unchanged, humanity attempting to secure itself, define itself, and elevate itself without reference to God. This continuity is what makes the pattern so difficult to detect. Because each version feels new, each one presents itself as progress. Each one claims to solve the problems of the previous stage. But underneath, the same principle is at work. Build a system strong enough to replace the need for anything beyond it. And it is precisely at this point, when the pattern becomes clear, that a second figure enters the narrative, not as a continuation of Babylon, but as its complete opposite, Jesus Christ. If Babylon is humanity reaching upward, Christ is God coming downward. This contrast is not symbolic, it is structural. Everything Babylon represents is inverted in him. Babylon lifts man up. It builds systems that exalt human ability, human identity, human power. It teaches that greatness comes from what we construct, what we control, what we achieve. Christ does the opposite. He does not ascend to prove his authority. He descends. He enters limitation. He takes on weakness. He steps into the very condition Babylon tries to escape. And in doing so, he redefines what power actually is. Babylon controls. It organizes, regulates, and manages human behavior through systems of reward and dependency. It offers security, but only at the cost of freedom. Participation is encouraged, but always within boundaries it defines. Christ liberates. He does not build a system to contain people. He calls individuals to freedom, not freedom without direction, but freedom rooted in truth. He does not demand loyalty through fear or benefit, but invites trust through relationship. Babylon operates through fear, fear of being scattered, fear of being vulnerable, a fear of losing identity, and it uses that fear to justify its existence. Christ operates through love, not as sentiment but as action. He does not remove vulnerability, he enters it. He does not eliminate suffering, he confronts it. And through that, he removes the fear that Babylon depends on to sustain itself. Babylon offers self-salvation. Build higher, achieve more, secure your place, make a name for yourself that cannot be erased. Christ offers grace, not something earned, not something constructed, but something given. He does not ask humanity to build a tower to reach heaven. He brings heaven down to humanity. This is the turning point of the entire narrative. Because from the beginning, Babylon has always tried to close the gap between man and God through effort, through structure, through control. But it does so without submission, without repentance, without relationship. Christ closes that same gap, but in the opposite direction. He does not demand that humanity climb. He descends to meet it. And the difference between those two approaches defines everything. One is driven by pride, the other by humility. One builds systems that grow stronger externally, but remain empty internally. The other transforms the inner life, regardless of external condition. One promises security, but delivers dependence, and the other offers surrender, but produces freedom. This is why the message of salvation stands in direct opposition to Babylon. It does not attempt to reform the system. It does not try to improve it or adjust it. It replaces it. Because the issue has never been the tools, technology, military, economy. The issue has always been the center. Who defines reality? Who holds authority? Who determines value? Babylon answers, man. Christ answers, God. And that answer is not enforced. It is offered. This is what makes it both powerful and unsettling, because it removes the possibility of neutrality. One cannot remain outside the tension. Every system, every decision, every structure ultimately aligns with one center or the other. Babylon continues to build, to adapt, to evolve. It will always offer something attractive: stability, identity, success. It will always present itself as the solution to human limitation. But Christ presents something entirely different. Not a system to enter, a relationship to return to, not a structure to build, a truth to accept. not a name to create, a name to trust. And that brings the entire narrative to its most personal level, because after all the cities, all the empires, all the systems, the final question is no longer about history, it is about you. Which center is being built in your life? The question does not fade when the narrative reaches its final contrast, it sharpens. Because once you see the pattern, once you recognize how Babel becomes Babylon, how Babylon becomes a system, and how that system stands in opposition to Jesus Christ, you can no longer treat it as distant history. It moves from the page into the present. And at that point, the conclusion is no longer theoretical. It becomes theological and deeply personal. Babylon does not die. It never has. It changes form. It adapts to the language of each generation, and it learns how to embed itself within whatever tools are most effective at the time: technology, governance, economics, culture. What once required bricks and towers now requires data and influence. What once needed armies now operates through systems of agreement and dependency. But the essence remains untouched. Babylon exists wherever humanity builds a center that replaces God. That is why it can appear in every age without being immediately recognized. Because people are not looking for Babylon, they are looking for solutions. Solutions to instability, to uncertainty, to vulnerability. And Babylon presents itself precisely in that space. It does not introduce itself as rebellion, and it introduces itself as order. But beneath that order lies the same intention: to create a structure strong enough that God is no longer necessary. This leads to the real battlefield of the entire narrative. It is not city versus city. It is not empire versus empire. It is not even system versus system. The true conflict is far more precise and far more difficult to confront. Who stands at the center? Because everything else flows from that. If the center is human ambition, then the system, no matter how advanced, no matter how efficient, will inevitably move toward control. It will prioritize stability over truth, success over righteousness, expansion over humility. It will begin to measure value in terms of output, influence, and dominance. And over time, it will require more loyalty, more compromise, more surrender, not to God, but to itself. This is where the warning becomes unavoidable. Babylon is always attractive. It has to be. No one willingly enters a system that appears destructive from the beginning. Babylon offers benefits first. It promises security, identity, belonging, success. It speaks in the language people want to hear. It aligns with their fears and presents itself as the answer. At Babel, it promised unity and protection from dispersion. In ancient Babylon, it offered power and prestige. In its final form, it offers access to markets, to influence, to global participation. And in every case, the entry point feels reasonable. That is what makes it dangerous. Because the cost is never presented up front. The cost comes later. It comes when participation requires compromise, and when alignment requires silence. When success demands that truth be adjusted or ignored. It comes when the system begins to define identity rather than simply support it. And by then, stepping away is no longer easy. Because Babylon does not just attract, it entangles. It creates a structure where leaving feels like loss. Loss of position, loss of connection, loss of opportunity. And so people remain, not always because they believe in it, but because they depend on it. This is how the system sustains itself, not through force, but through attachment. And yet, throughout the entire narrative, from Babel to the prophets to the final vision, there is a consistent call. It does not change, it does not soften. Come out of Babylon. This is not a geographical command. It is not about relocating to a different place. It is about reorienting the center. To come out of Babylon is to refuse its defining principles. It means rejecting the idea that ambition is the highest good. Not ambition in the sense of growth or effort, but ambition that seeks to elevate the self above all else. The drive to make a name at any cost. It means stepping away from control as an ultimate goal. Recognizing that the desire to manage every outcome, to secure every variable, often replaces trust with domination. And perhaps most difficult of all, it means confronting pride, not as an occasional flaw, but as a foundational orientation, the belief that one can define truth, secure identity, and sustain life independently. To come out of Babylon is not passive. It requires awareness. It requires discernment. It requires the willingness to stand outside of what appears normal, successful, and even necessary in order to remain aligned with what is true. And that alignment is not found in a system. It is found in a person. The same contrast remains at the center. Babylon builds upward. Christ comes downward. Babylon demands construction. Christ offers redemption. And Babylon creates dependence on itself. Christ restores dependence on God. This is why the call is not simply to reject something, but to turn towards someone. Because leaving Babylon without moving toward truth only creates another version of the same problem. The system may change, the center does not. So the conclusion is not a warning alone, it is a decision. Babylon will continue to exist in visible and invisible forms. It will continue to adapt, to attract, to promise. It will continue to offer a version of life that feels secure, defined, and self-sufficient. But beneath every version, the same question remains. Who is at the center? Not in theory, not in language, but in practice, in the way you define success, the way you respond to fear, the way you pursue identity, the way you make decisions when no one is watching. Because Babylon is not only something you see, it is something you can participate in or walk away from. And that choice, quiet, often unseen, is where the entire story finds its final meaning.